In August 2020, a group of volunteers was sent to clean up the South Colony Lakes campground, one of the most popular destinations in the Colorado mountains. Known for its breathtaking scenery, crystal clear alpine lakes, and towering peaks, the area has always drawn hikers and adventurers. That day, as the team worked through the abandoned structures scattered in the woods, they came across an old concrete outhouse. Its door had been boarded shut for years. When the planks were pried loose, the rotten wood creaked open, revealing a damp, pitch-dark room filled with dust and the suffocating smell of decay. In the corner, buried beneath layers of thick cobwebs, sat a weathered, dark-colored backpack. Inside were a jacket, maps, and several personal documents, all carrying the same name, Samantha Jones. For the locals, that name was all too familiar. 8 years earlier, Samantha had vanished without a trace in these very mountains. Search teams made up of hundreds of volunteers, rescue dogs, and even helicopters had scoured the rugged terrain for weeks, yet not a single clue had been found. And now, after nearly a decade, Samantha's backpack had resurfaced in a sealed, forgotten room in the forest. The discovery immediately reignited the chilling question that had haunted her family and the community for years. What really happened to Samantha on that stormy night in 2012? And why had her belongings been left behind in such a strange, hidden place? It was July 2012 when 27-year-old Samantha Jones packed her gear for what was supposed to be a simple solo hike. She was no stranger to the outdoors. Friends remembered her as an adventurous spirit who found peace in the silence of the mountains. Driving her silver SUV, she made her way to the trailhead at South Colony Lakes, parking in the crowded lot where dozens of other hikers had begun their own journeys that morning. The last confirmed image of Samantha came from a security camera at the trailhead. In it, she can be seen hoisting a medium-sized backpack onto her shoulders, adjusting her jacket, and stepping onto the dirt path alone. She looked prepared, calm, and determined. Witnesses later recalled small details. One man said he saw her walking with earbuds in, her head gently nodding to music. Another remembered spotting her perched on a rock outcrop, scribbling into a small notebook as the wind whipped across the ridge. These fleeting impressions would become the final living memories anyone had of her. That evening, the weather turned unexpectedly brutal. Dark clouds rolled over the peaks, and by nightfall, sheets of rain pounded the slopes. The temperature plummeted close to freezing. Lightning flashed across the ridgelines, followed by long rumbles that echoed through the valley. Many hikers hurried back to their tents or down the mountain, but Samantha did not return. 3 days later, her SUV remained parked exactly where she had left it, untouched. The discovery triggered alarm among park officials and her family. By then, the storms had passed, but Samantha was nowhere to be found. Search efforts were launched immediately. At first, there was hope that she had simply taken a longer route or become delayed, but as hours stretched into days, worry deepened. She had carried enough supplies for only a short trek: food, water, and a change of clothes. Without them, survival in the cold mountain nights would have been nearly impossible. Friends described Samantha as careful, not reckless. She wasn't known for taking unnecessary risks. And yet, here she was missing in the wilderness, as if she had stepped off the trail and vanished into thin air. The mountains, majestic and timeless, had swallowed countless stories before. On that July night in 2012, they took Samantha Jones into their silence. No one could have guessed that her trail would end not with a safe return, but with a mystery that would stretch on for years, leaving her family to cling to hope against the unforgiving weight of uncertainty. The alarm was raised within hours of Samantha being reported missing. By the 4th day after she failed to return, South Colony Lakes had transformed from a quiet alpine paradise into the center of a massive search operation. Rangers, deputies, and volunteers poured into the area. Her silver SUV, still sitting at the trailhead, was a chilling reminder that she had never made it back. The search began methodically. Trained dogs were brought in, their noses pressed low to the damp earth, weaving through pine forests and along ridgelines. For a time, it seemed they had found something, faint tracks leading deeper into the wilderness. But just as suddenly as they appeared, the tracks ended in a patch of mud, where rain had washed everything clean. From there, the trail went cold. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades thundering against the valley walls. Thermal imaging equipment scanned for body heat hidden beneath tree cover. Drones hovered above cliff faces and ravines. Every outcropping, every crevice that could conceal a person was investigated. Volunteers formed search grids, sweeping shoulder to shoulder across meadows, shouting Samantha's name into the silence. The only answer was the sound of wind moving through the trees. Days turned into a week. Campfires from the search teams dotted the night slopes, glowing like fragile beacons of hope. Samantha's parents arrived, clinging to each other, their faces lined with exhaustion. They handed out flyers, spoke with reporters, and begged hikers passing through to keep an eye out for anything, a piece of clothing, a scrap of fabric, any sign that their daughter had been there. Despite the intensity of the effort, not a single belonging of Samantha's was recovered. No water bottle, no notebook, no food wrapper. For a woman who had walked into the wilderness with a fully packed backpack, the silence of the mountains seemed deliberate, as if every trace had been swallowed. The community was shaken. South Colony Lakes was not an isolated trail known only to a few. On the day she vanished, dozens of other hikers had passed through. How could someone disappear so completely in such a well-traveled place? As the second week closed, the mood shifted. Optimism gave way to grim resignation. Search leaders spoke quietly about survival odds. With each frigid night, the chances of Samantha being found alive dwindled. Her family refused to give up, urging teams to continue even as resources stretched thin. By the end of a month, the official search was called off. Rangers packed their gear, dogs were led back to their vehicles, and helicopters lifted away for the last time. The mountains returned to their silence, holding on to their secret. For her family, it was unbearable. There was no body to mourn, no grave to visit. Only the SUV at the trailhead, and the echo of questions that no one could answer. Samantha Jones had walked into the forest and simply vanished, and for the next 8 years that was all anyone knew. 8 long years passed. Seasons came and went across the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, bearing trails in snow each winter and thawing them to green meadows in the summer. Hikers still came to South Colony Lakes, setting up tents beside the water, climbing the jagged peaks above. For many, Samantha Jones was just another name on a missing poster, long faded and torn by the weather. But for her family, the wound never closed. They waited for the phone call that never came, still hoping for an answer, however painful it might be. Then, in the summer of 2020, a group of volunteers arrived to restore and clean old facilities around the lake. Among the structures was a small concrete outhouse, long abandoned, its doors sealed with heavy boards. Few paid it any mind, just another relic of a forgotten trail system. But when the volunteers pried it open, the silence of 8 years shattered. Inside the dark, stale room lay a backpack resting against the wall. Dust clung to its straps. Cobwebs stretched across its faded fabric. When they pulled it into the light, the truth became undeniable. Inside were familiar objects: a jacket, a notebook, maps of the region, packets of food, batteries, and an identification card. Every item bore the same name, Samantha Jones. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. News spread quickly, reopening a mystery many believed had gone cold forever. How could her belongings sit undisturbed for nearly a decade, locked away in a cabin that should have been searched years earlier? And more haunting still, where was Samantha? The answer came only days later. Roughly 200 meters from the outhouse, in a thicket of brush hidden off the main trail, searchers discovered a set of human remains. A skull, scattered bones, and remnants of weathered fabric lay half buried in the soil. DNA testing would confirm what her family had both dreaded and longed to know. The remains belonged to Samantha Jones. The initial forensic analysis suggested a violent fall. Her skull and pelvis bore fractures consistent with a hard impact, as though she had slipped from a rocky ledge or stumbled into a ravine. For investigators, the conclusion seemed simple. Samantha had been injured, left her heavy pack behind in search of help, and eventually succumbed to the mountain's unforgiving terrain. But for many others, the discovery only deepened the riddle. Why had her pack been hidden in a boarded-up structure? Why was her body so close by, yet unseen for nearly a decade in a region so frequently traveled? And who had sealed that door, locking her belongings inside? The mountains had finally given up part of their secret, but what they revealed was not clarity. It was a puzzle, one that seemed to defy explanation even after all those years. When the remains were officially identified as Samantha's, investigators moved quickly to reconstruct what they believed had happened on that July day in 2012. To the authorities, the evidence painted a picture that was tragic but not mysterious. According to the official report, Samantha likely sustained an injury while navigating the rugged terrain. The storm that rolled in that evening brought driving rain and lightning, making the trails slick and treacherous. Somewhere along the route, investigators believed, she may have slipped, injuring herself badly enough that she sought immediate shelter. The abandoned outhouse, though crude, would have offered her protection from the storm and a place to rest. Inside, she may have realized her condition would prevent her from carrying the heavy load she had brought. So, the theory goes, she made the decision to leave her backpack behind food, maps, batteries, and all in order to lighten her burden. With only her clothes and perhaps a small item in hand, she stepped back into the storm, hoping to find a way back to the trailhead, or to stumble upon another hiker. Tragically, she never made it. Just a short distance from the outhouse, the terrain dropped sharply into hidden gullies and rocky crevices. The fractures in her skull and pelvis were consistent with a fall from height. Alone, injured, and disoriented, Samantha likely succumbed quickly after the accident. With that conclusion, authorities officially closed the case. Their final ruling was stark and simple: accidental death. To them, there was no evidence of foul play, no indication of another person's involvement, and no reason to suspect anything more than the brutal reality of mountain wilderness. For Samantha's grieving family, the official version offered some closure. They finally had a body to lay to rest, a grave to visit, and an answer at least on paper. Yet, even as the final report was signed, many who followed the case felt the explanation left too many questions unanswered. A young woman's life had ended in the shadows of Colorado's peaks, but whether the story was truly as simple as an accident remained a point of unease, one that refused to fade even after the file was stamped case closed. The official explanation might have closed the case in the eyes of law enforcement, but for many who studied Samantha's disappearance, it only raised more questions than it answered. The details, when examined closely, felt out of place, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to lock together. The first and most glaring issue was the backpack. Inside that concrete outhouse, volunteers had discovered her food, water, maps, batteries, and even her jacket items that could have meant the difference between life and death. If Samantha had truly left the shelter to search for help, why would she abandon every essential tool for survival? Why not carry at least some food, or a flashlight, or the maps that could guide her back towards safety? Leaving everything behind seemed to contradict her reputation as a cautious and experienced hiker. Then there was the matter of the outhouse itself. When the volunteers found it, the door had been boarded shut from the outside. Who had sealed it, and when? If Samantha had gone inside during the storm, did she board it from the inside before leaving? That made no sense. More disturbingly, if someone else had boarded it afterward, were they trying to hide something or someone? The idea that her belongings had been locked away by human hands lingered heavily in the minds of investigators and armchair detectives alike. The location of her remains added to the unease. She was found only about 200 meters from the outhouse, but hidden deep within brush off the main trail. For years, that area had been combed by search parties, crisscrossed by helicopters, and explored by volunteers. How had her body escaped detection for so long? And why was it off-trail, in such a concealed spot, rather than along a path where someone injured would logically try to travel? Even the condition of her body raised doubts. While the fractures suggested a fall, some experts noted that her injuries could also have been caused by other means. There was no way to determine for certain after so many years. And another strange detail unsettled many. Her clothing and shoes were missing. Scavenging animals could have scattered them, but no scraps, no torn fabric, no leather soles were ever recovered. It was as if they had vanished along with her. Whispers began to circulate of a bearded man, a transient who had been spotted around the trailhead during that summer. Hikers remembered him asking for food, sometimes lingering near campsites. Could he have crossed paths with Samantha? Could he have been the one to move her belongings, or worse? Nothing concrete ever tied him to her disappearance, but his shadow loomed over the story. Finally, there were the reports that surfaced from the night she vanished. Hikers recalling distant cries that sounded like a woman screaming. Flashes of light bobbing through the trees long after the storm had driven most people off the mountain. These accounts were dismissed as unreliable, yet when paired with the later discoveries, they left a chilling possibility. Perhaps Samantha was not alone in those final hours. The mountains had yielded some answers, but the questions that remained were heavier still. If her death was an accident, why did so much about it feel so wrong? For those unwilling to accept the official conclusion, every overlooked detail became a potential clue, every rumor a possible lead. As the case resurfaced in 2020, new eyes scoured old evidence, and from the shadows emerged theories that painted a far more complex story than a simple fall in the mountains. One piece of information came from drone footage taken during the original 2012 search. Reviewing old files, a volunteer noticed what looked like a dark shape near the edge of the forest. At the time, search coordinators dismissed it as nothing more than shadows cast by trees. But looking back years later, some wondered if it might have been something else, a body partially concealed, or an object overlooked in the chaos of those frantic days. Then there was the map found inside Samantha's backpack. Among the trails and contour lines, someone had circled a faint, rarely used path leading toward an abandoned ranger cabin deeper in the wilderness. Had Samantha intended to explore that route, or had she marked it after hearing about it from someone else? No one could say for sure, but the marking seemed deliberate, suggesting she had a destination beyond the main trail. Adding to the mystery were the stories told by locals. Several residents remembered a man disheveled, with a scraggly beard hanging around the trailhead during the summer of 2012. He was said to beg for food, sometimes startling campers with his sudden appearances. Although no evidence directly linked him to Samantha, speculation spread quickly. Could he have followed her? Could he have moved her backpack into the outhouse after her disappearance? Some even suggested he might have boarded it shut. Other hikers reported hearing screams on the night of the storm. At least 2 separate groups described what they believed were cries for help echoing across the valley. Along with those sounds came reports of strange lights flickering in the forest, not lightning, but smaller, bobbing beams, as though someone was moving through the trees with a flashlight long after most had fled the mountain. If true, these accounts hinted that Samantha had not been entirely alone in her final moments. Each theory branched into unsettling possibilities. One idea was that Samantha had sought shelter only to be discovered by someone with darker intentions. Perhaps her pack was locked away to erase evidence, while she was forced into the wilderness without the supplies that might have saved her. Another theory imagined that she had tried to escape from whoever she encountered, fleeing into the night and ultimately falling to her death. Of course, there were simpler explanations too. The boarding on the outhouse may have predated her disappearance. Animals could have scattered her clothing and shoes. The map markings might have been nothing more than notes for a future hike, yet the weight of coincidence felt heavy, too heavy to ignore. What remained was a haunting uncertainty. Every clue seemed to stop just short of providing answers, leaving only fragments of a story that would never be complete. And with each new theory came the same chilling thought. If Samantha's death wasn't an accident, then somewhere in those mountains, another presence had once walked beside her. Time has passed, and yet Samantha's story still lingers, like mist caught between the mountain ridges. Her family has aged, her friends have moved forward with their lives, but the wound of her disappearance has never fully healed. The recovery of her backpack, locked away in an old outhouse, provided a strange kind of closure and, at the same time, a deeper torment. Closure because it confirmed she had truly been there, in that vast wilderness. Torment because it raised more questions than it answered. Her parents, in interviews years later, spoke of how every discovery felt like being pulled back to the summer of 2012. The sound of rain on the roof would remind them of that violent storm. The smell of pine would bring back the endless hours waiting at the ranger station for news that never came. The backpack itself, once a simple tool for exploration, had transformed into a silent witness, carrying with it a weight of grief and unanswered questions. For many who followed the case, Samantha became more than just a missing hiker. She became a symbol of how fragile our steps are against the vastness of nature, and how quickly a single choice, a single storm, can change everything. Yet beneath the surface, an unease remained. The official explanation never fully silenced the doubts. There were still whispers of the outhouse, of the boarded door, of the strange lights that some swore they had seen on the night she vanished. Today, when hikers pass the trail where Samantha was last seen, some leave flowers, others whisper prayers. A few say they feel a presence, a chill in the air, or the sensation of being watched from between the trees. Perhaps it is only imagination, stirred by the story they know so well. Or perhaps it is something more. What is certain is that Samantha's final journey will never truly be known. The mountains hold their secrets tightly, and they rarely return them whole. All that remains is a haunting reminder. Sometimes the most terrifying mysteries are not those hidden deep in the forest, but the ones left inside us, the unanswered questions that follow us home and refuse to let go. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Here, we share more haunting mysteries and unforgettable true stories that deserve to be remembered. Your support helps us bring these voices back from the silence.